Hey everyone, so here's your lesson for today. It's called inverse functions and their derivatives. So first, you guys, I want to do a really quick review of what inverse functions are and how to find them. Okay, so from Algebra 2 trick, let's say I gave you this example. Let's say I said, I don't know where I wrote it down. My gosh, okay, let's say I said f of x equals 2x plus 7, and then I asked you to find f inverse of x, okay? So this little notation, if you don't remember from Algebra 2 trig, f to the negative 1 there, that means the inverse. That does not mean 1 over f of x, okay? It's not like a negative exponent. It just actually means inverse. So when you see that, that means inverse. So how do you do that? Now, I don't know if you remember this, but to find an inverse, so let's write that over here. To find an inverse, you switch. Okay, I don't even know how to spell. My gosh, let's try that again. You switch. Is that how you spell switch? Okay, I don't know. The x's and y's, and then you solve for y. Okay, so I don't know if you remember this, but you might be going, switch the x's and y's. I don't even have a y in here. Well, remember, f of x is just a fancy name for a y, so let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to have y equals 2x plus 7. Now, what does it mean to switch the x's and y's? Well, it just literally means put the x where the y was and put the y where the x was. So we're just going to flip them around. So what would your new equation be? It would say x equals 2y plus 7. Okay, so I just switched the x's and y's. Now step 2 is to solve for y. So how do I solve this equation for y? Well, I subtract 7, so I'm going to get x minus 7 equals 2y, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide everything by 2. So if I divide this by 2, I'm going to get y equals x minus 7 divided by 2. Okay, now that is what's called the inverse of f of x. Now, I'm going to write this in a different way, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and write y equals, if I divide both of these by 2, because I want to show you something graphically, x over 2 minus 7 over 2. I'm going to go ahead and graph it that way so you could see a little bit better. Actually, write it one more way. Remember, x over 2 is another way of just saying 1/2 x minus 7 over 2. Now look, there's a reason why I'm writing it this way. It's so I can show you graphically how these functions and their inverses are related to each other. Okay, so let's graph both of these and see what happens. This is still review from algebra, so check it out. Okay, so I'm going to graph the very first equation here. So my first equation is this guy, which is y equals 2x plus 7. You guys, that is just a line, right? That crosses the y-axis at 7. So let's go up 7. Is that enough? Okay, we'll just go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It goes up 7, right? That's your y-intercept. And then the slope is 2. So that means I'm going to go up 2 and over 1. So I'll get right there. If I go up 2 and over 1, I'll be right here, okay? So this is f of x. I kind of want you guys to see what's going to happen here. So this we call f of x. All right, now how do I graph its inverse? Remember, we said this was the inverse function. Should have rescaled this. This is going to be a nightmare. Yeah, I'm going to rescale this. You guys, I'm sorry. I'm better teaching live than doing these videos. Okay, the reason why I'm rescaling it is because it's weird. Okay, hang on a second. Let's do this. Don't panic, we're all good. Let's try this one more time. Okay, so I'm going to graph y equals 2x plus 7 one more time. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's my y-intercept. And then my slope is 2, so I'm going to go up 2 over 1. So I'm going to go up 2 over 1, which is going to be right there. I'm running out of room, so instead I'll go down 2 and left 1, all right? And go down 2, left 1, kind of make it look like that. Let's do a couple points, down 2, left 1. Okay, so this line right here, this is my f of x. I didn't even center. Oh my gosh. Let's try that one more time. It just won't be straight, whatever. Okay, so this is your f of x. Now, I want to go ahead and graph its inverse. Let's do that in blue. So I'm going to graph this line right here, which is the inverse of x, and I want you to look at the graphs of the lines and see what you notice. So on this one, my y-intercept is -7/2, and you guys, -7/2 is -3.5. So I'm going to cross the x-axis or y-axis at -1, -2, -3.5. So right there, a half. And then the slope this time is 1/2. So I'm going to go up 1 and then over 2. So I'm going to end up there, right? I'm going to go up 1 and over 2, up 1 and over 2. So it's going to look something like this. Does that make sense? Okay, now look, the first thing I want you to notice about these two graphs, okay, is that they have a line of symmetry. And I don't know if you remember this from Algebra 2 trig, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, okay? The line y equals x, which is just this line right here down the center, okay? If you look at it, these are symmetrical about that line. So if I were to fold my piece of paper on that dotted line, the blue line would end up on top of the black line, or the black line would end up on top of the blue line. Now I want you to notice something else also. Check this out. This point right here, right? This was the point 0, 7, okay? And then you guys, if I look at this, if I go like equally distanced there, and if I go equal distance to there, okay, notice what this point right here is. It's not crossing very well, but this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it should have actually crossed here. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is like a horrible lesson. Let me erase this. Hang on a second. Why is it erasing all of it? Okay, try this. It's actually supposed to be like right here is where it's supposed to cross. I had a really bad graph. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's supposed to cross right there. Sorry. Okay, so that's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this point is 7, 0. Okay, so notice here you had 0, 7. Here you had 7, 0. Let's do it to another one and see if we can get like a really nice one going here. Okay, let's maybe look at this point right here. This point right here is -2, 3. Okay, and so look, if I go down to my line right there, right? Right on the other side there, you guys, if I look on the other side, I'm doing this all wrong. Oh my gosh, hang on a second. I'm not drawing this right. This is like the worst lesson on the face of the planet. If I look at, so I'm at -2, 3. And then if I draw this thing going down perpendicular to it, so it's going to be like somewhere right there, okay? And then I draw a line perpendicular to here. Look where I'm going to end up. I'm going to end up right here. And this line right there, that point is 3, -2. Okay? So look at your points. What happened to my points? Do you guys see how the x's and the y's actually switched? Look, this used to be the x, this used to be the y, and now they switched. This is the new x, this is the new y. So the 0 became the 7, and the 7 became the 0. So literally your x's and your y's switched, right? Same thing on this one. This used to be the x, this used to be the y. Here's your new x and y. The x's and y, they just flip-flopped, okay? So the first thing that we need to know about inverse functions, so write this down, inverse functions. I can't even spell. This is like the worst lesson ever. Oh my gosh, let's try this again. Inverse functions. The first thing you need to know about these guys is that if you have a point x, y, the inverse function is going to switch to yx. So the y's and the x's are going to flip. Okay, now another thing about inverse functions, I want you to take a look at their slopes. Okay, so check this out. Let's look at the original function. What was the slope of the original function, which was y equals 2x plus 7? Let's write that over here. So f of x was 2x plus 7. Okay, that was the original function. And then this right here was my inverse function. So f inverse of x ended up being 1/2 x minus 7 over 2. Okay, so look at their slopes. Let's check out their slopes. The slope of f of x was 2. The slope of f inverse x was 1/2. So think about this mathematically. How are 2 and 1/2 related to each other mathematically? What do you guys think? They are reciprocals of each other. They are reciprocals of each other. Okay, so how are the slopes related? So the slopes are reciprocals. Okay, so for example, if you had f of x and f inverse of x here, okay, let's look at this, okay? If f of x had a slope of, I don't know, 3 over 2, what do you think f inverse of x would have a slope of? The reciprocal, you just flip it, so that would be 2 over 3, okay? Or let's say that f of x had a slope of negative 5, what do you think the reciprocal of negative 5 would be? You just flip it. Negative 5 over 1 flipped is negative 1 over 5. So the signs don't change, it's just that you take its reciprocal, okay? Now, how do you do problems in calculus based off of inverse functions? It sounds really weird, but the way that you do inverse functions is you set up this cute little template, okay? So for inverse functions, whenever you see the word inverse or anything like that, or if you see the word inverse or you see f to the negative 1 of x like that, okay, always set this up, okay? I want you to go f of x, and then a line, and then f inverse of x, and then a line under that, okay? And then I want you to make a little point. So this is going to be for xy, xy. And then I want you to here, I want you to go f prime of whatever this point is equals, and then we're going to do f inverse prime of whatever this number is. Okay, now you're probably going, oh my gosh, Miss Cruzy, what is this? It's really not that bad. Let me show you an example, okay? So let's do a couple of these. I'll do as many as I can so your homework's really easy tonight. So let's look at example 1. So example 1 says, so your first calculus question here with inverses. Let's say that f of 3 equals 8 and f prime of 3 equals 5. And it says find f inverse of 8 and the slope of f inverse of x at x equals 8. Okay, kind of a crazy question. Now look, you don't have to draw anything out or really even calculate anything, okay? You just need to set up this little template that I made for you, okay? So let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to have f of x, and then a line under, and then I have its inverse, f inverse of x, and then a line under, okay? Now, the point I'm going to put in here for f of x, okay? I'm going to ask myself, did they give me a point on graph f? Okay, well, here's graph f, right? It said f of 3 equals 8. So what are these values? So first of all, this is your x value in f, and this is your y value in f. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. This is 3, 8. That's what f of 3 equals 8. That means the point 38 is on the graph of f, okay? Now, let's go ahead and do the f inverse of that, okay? What did I tell you guys about points on inverses? Remember, they just switch. So if this was 3, 8, on the inverse, it's going to switch and it's going to be 8, 3. Does that make sense? Okay, so that is just from knowing what inverses are. Now, let's go ahead and do the rest of the little template. Okay, so the rest of the template goes like this, okay? I'm going to go ahead and write f prime of, now remember, what does f prime mean? You guys, f prime means the derivative or the slope. So here we're talking about the slopes of these functions. So it's f prime of, and then what am I going to stick in there? Whatever this x value is, I'm going to go ahead and stick it in there. F prime of 3 equals, okay? And then for this one, I'm going to write f inverse prime of. Okay, so that's the derivative of f inverse. And again, I'm going to stick in whatever this number is and write of 8 equals. Okay, now let's see what they gave me. If I have any of the values that they gave me, that will really help. So I need to find out what is f prime of 3. Did they give me that? Oh my gosh, they sure did. They said f prime of 3 equals 5. So I can go ahead and fill that in. Okay, so this equals 5. Now, what would the inverse be? Okay, so look, it says if the slope of my function f is 5, this is again talking about the slope. What would the slope of the inverse be? So how are the slopes related again? You guys look at this. Okay, if we look up here, the slopes are reciprocals. And remember, we did some examples right here showing how to do that. So look, if the slope of my function f, or the derivative, is 5, what's the reciprocal of 5? That would just be 1/5. So this right here is the reciprocal of 5. Okay, so you just flip 5 over 1 to get 1 over 5. Now, once you have this table completed, you can answer any question that you possibly have, okay? So let's see what questions they asked me here. They kind of asked me in a funny way. So the first question they asked me was, what is f inverse of 8? Okay, so how do I answer that question? Well, let's look at our table. F inverse of 8. This is saying when x is 8, what is the y value of f inverse? Well, look at this. All of this is talking about f inverse, right? So when x equals 8, this is x, what is the y value of that inverse function? It's 3. So this answer would be 3. So that's the answer to the first question. Okay? Now, what's the other question they asked me? They said, what is the slope of f inverse of x? All right, well, what's another way of saying slope? Slope just means derivative, right? So this is a fancy way of saying, what is f inverse, the derivative of f inverse at x equals 8, at 8? And again, all your answers should be on the table. So you guys look, it's right here. F inverse, the derivative at 8, is 1 over 5. So this is 1 over 5. Okay? So go do your homework. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to do more examples. I know the first example was kind of weird. Let me do a couple more and show you guys until you get really good at this. Because actually, these are the easy questions. Okay? They're just kind of weird. Something you've never really seen before. Okay, let's look at number 2. What if I gave you this? What if I said the point 34 is on f of x? Okay? And then I also told you that f prime of 3 equals 2/5. And then I told you that g of x is the inverse of f of x. And the question finally is find g prime of 4. Okay, so lots of stuff here, lots of information. So how do I deal with all this information? I'm going to put it into my little template, okay? So I'm going to write, again, f of x with a line under it, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and write f inverse of x with a line under it, okay? Now, you guys, one thing I noticed this time, though, okay? They called the inverse of x something different. They said g of x is the inverse of f of x. So for the first time, I don't have to call it this anymore. I can just call this g of x because they told me that I'm going to call the inverse of f of x, I'm going to call it g of x instead of calling it f to the negative 1. So they gave it a new name. And you might be like, oh my gosh, that makes it more complicated. Actually, it's easier than writing the f inverse, okay? So let's do our little template, okay? My first thing I'm going to have is my little point, okay? Did they give me a point on f of x? Okay, so look at what they gave me. Yes, they did. Look, they said the point 34 is on f of x. So let's go ahead and plug that in. This is 3, 4. Now, right off the bat, I can go to my other point, okay? I know that g of x, that's the inverse function, okay? How are points related in inverse functions? Remember that x's and y's switch. So if on f of x it's 3, 4, then on g of x it's just going to be 4, 3. They're just going to flip. Does that make sense? Okay, so these are the points. Now let's look at the slopes. And remember, another way of saying slope is derivative. So I'm going to write f prime of, and I'm going to drop that x value right in there, f prime of 3 equals. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this one. Now my function this time, we're calling it g. So I'm going to write g prime of, drop that x value in, of 4 equals. Okay, now let's see if we have anything else that they gave us, okay, because I need more information here. Okay, do I know what f prime of 3 is? Oh my gosh, I do. F prime of 3 is 2/5. So let's go ahead and put that in. F prime of 3 is 2/5. And then these are the slopes. How are the slopes related in inverse functions? Remember, they're just reciprocals of each other. So if f prime of 3 is 2/5, then the inverse slope would be 5/2. Okay, so this is just the reciprocal of 2/5. Okay, now once you fill everything in, again, you should be able to answer any question that they give you. So what was the question? It says find g prime of 4. Well, look at this. G prime of 4 is 5/2. So g prime of 4, you can answer your question. G prime of 4 equals 5/2. Isn't that kind of cool? Do you want to see another one? I'll show you another one. Okay, let's see this one. All right, what if I had -1/6 is on f of x equals x squared minus x plus 4. Okay, and then the question is find f inverse prime of 6. Okay, so this time they're giving us a little bit less information, which means I'm probably going to have to do some calculus. Okay, so let's set up the little template. Every time you see something that says inverse or to the -1, always set up this little template. So I have f of x with a line, and then this time they're calling the inverse function f to the -1 of x. Okay, like it better when they call it g because I don't have to write the -1, but it's okay. All right, setting up our template. We're going to have point, right? So let's fill in these points. Do we have any points? Well, let's see what they gave me. They said -1, 6 is on f of x, okay? So that means that this is -1, 6. That is on f of x. So what would it be on f inverse of x? Remember the x's and y's flip, so this is going to be 6, -1. Does that make sense? Okay, now the next one, the next part of the template, I'm going to find f prime of, and then I'm going to plug this little x value in, -1 equals, I don't know what it equals yet, but we're going to find out soon, right? And then this one right here, I'm going to do, this function is f inverse, so I'm going to go f inverse prime of, and then I'm going to plug in the x value, which is 6. Okay? Now, on the other two examples, we actually had this information. But in this one, you guys, they didn't give me this information. I don't know what f prime of -1 is. They didn't tell me. So that means I have to actually find it. So how do you find f prime of -1? So let's do it on the side here. How do you find f prime of -1? Well, this means take the derivative of f. So here's f. I can take the derivative, right? So f prime of x is 2x minus 1. And then it says plug in -1. So f prime of -1, if I plug in -1, it's 2 times -1 minus 1, which is -2 minus 1, which is -3. So f prime of -1 equals -3. Okay, so I had to actually find it instead of them giving to me. Now, if I know that f prime of -1, so the slope at -1 of f is -3, okay, what would the slope be on the inverse function? Remember, it's just the reciprocal of this. What's the reciprocal of -3? That's -1/3. So once you have this table filled in, you should be able to answer all of the questions, okay? What was the question they asked you? They asked you, what is f inverse prime of 6? Well, f inverse prime of 6 right here was that -1/3. So the answer to this is that this equals -1/3. Okay? All right, let me give you one more. Let's do one more question. Okay, number 4. Okay, now this one I'm going to try to mess you up a little bit, okay? It tells you that f of g of x equals g of f of x, and that equals x. You crying yet? I'll tell you what that means in a second. Okay, and then they told you that g prime of 5 equals -3. F of 2 equals 5, and the question is find f prime of 2. Okay, All right, so you guys, first of all, in this question, I don't see anything that says inverse function. I don't see the word inverse. I don't see f to the -1, but they did give me this funky definition of something that resembles something from Algebra 2 Trig, okay? You guys, this is just a fancy way of saying that f and g are inverses of each other, okay? Let me remind you of that really quickly, okay? This is a composition of two functions. It says that if you plug g into f and you plug f into g, they are both going to equal x. This is, again, just a fancy way of saying that f of x and g of x are inverses of each other. Okay, so the reason why I threw that out there is because once in a blue moon, instead of saying the functions are inverses, they will actually give you the algebraic definition of what it means to be an inverse, which is that thing highlighted in pink. Okay, so now that I know that those are inverses, let's set up our little template. And you guys, this problem is literally like one of my favorite problems on the whole world. Okay, it's so much fun to see. Watch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write f of x. Okay, and then what did they call its inverse function? They called it g of x, which I really like because I don't have to write that -1. Okay, set up my little template. I've got my point. So there's my point. And let's go ahead and plug in our points. Do I have any points anywhere? Well, if I look at this, what I notice here is they gave me this one. They gave me that f of 2 is 5, which means that if x equals 2, then y equals 5 on the function f. So I can go ahead and plug that in here. X equals 2 and y equals 5, okay? Now, what do I know about g of x then? What's it going to be on g of x if this is the inverse function? They're just going to flip, right? This is going to be 5, 2, all right? Now, let's set up the rest of the template here. Okay, I'm going to have f prime of, plug that x in, 2 equals, and then I'm going to have here, this function is called g now. I lied. This is not my favorite problem. I was looking for a different one. G prime of, let's go ahead and plug this 5 in, and equals. Okay, now let's see if we have anything. Okay, so do I know what f prime of 2 is? No, sadly, that's what we're looking for. Okay, let's look at the other one. Do I know what g prime of 5 is? Yes, I do. Look, they told me right there. They said g prime of 5 is -3, okay? And you guys, how is this number and this number related? Remember, these are the slopes. These are the derivatives. They are reciprocals of each other. So what's the reciprocal of -3? That would be -1/3, okay? Now, the question is, what were they asking me to begin with, right? The question was find f prime of 2. Again, once my table's complete, I should be able to answer any of these questions. So it says f prime of 2 is -1/3, okay? So that is my final answer. So this would be f prime of 2 equals -1/3. Trying to figure out where my favorite question went. It's kind of sad. I don't know where I put it. I'll find it and I'll do it with you guys tomorrow. Okay. All right. So you guys, this is inverse functions. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you're having a nice day with Miss Lynn. She's the best. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Okay. Have a good day.